Did you know the most famous pyramid in Egypt may not be the first pyramid at all? We are trained to picture Giza, 3 perfect triangles, rising clean and smooth from the desert. The Great Pyramid cut sharp against a blue sky. For thousands of years, that has been the postcard image of ancient Egypt. Most of us grew up believing this is where the story begins, but old legends tell a different story. Imagine the camera pulling away from Giza, spinning south across the Nile, and dropping down onto a harsher, older landscape, the Saqqara Plateau. The sand here feels different, more broken, more ancient. Out of it rises a strange, jagged form, not a smooth triangle, but 6 giant stone steps, stacked like a stairway to nowhere. This is the Step Pyramid of Djoser, older than Giza, rougher, but in many ways far more mysterious. We are told we know who built Egypt's pyramids. Pharaohs commanded, workers obeyed, architects followed clear blueprints. But what really happened when the very first pyramid appeared here at Saqqara? Who decided to take simple, rectangular tombs called mastabas and stack them into a towering stone mountain that changed architecture forever? And why is the name of its architect, Imhotep, remembered for thousands of years as if he were almost a god? Welcome back to the channel. Here we explore the mysteries, history, and forgotten lore of ancient Egypt slowly and calmly, so you can relax, unwind, and drift off while learning about one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history. From the pyramids and hidden chambers beneath the sands to the gods, pharaohs, and ancient stories carved into temple walls along the Nile. If you enjoy relaxing history like this, consider subscribing and joining us for more journeys into the ancient world. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's return to the sands of Egypt. According to the stories, Imhotep was not just a builder. He was a high priest of Heliopolis, a healer, a master of sacred rituals. Later ages worshipped him as a lord of wisdom. So what kind of knowledge did he carve into this strange stepped monument for his king, Pharaoh Djoser? Was it only a royal tomb, or a stone textbook from the mystery schools teaching initiates how to navigate the afterlife? Beneath the Step Pyramid lies a hidden world. Kilometers of tunnels twist under the desert, lined with blue faience tiles that shimmer like a palace made of water. Chambers branch off in every direction, some painted with stars, as if the underworld itself were turned into a night sky. This is not a simple burial shaft. It feels like a labyrinth, designed for a journey. Through darkness, through symbolic gates, towards something waiting at the center. Most importantly, the Step Pyramid does not behave like a crude experiment before Giza. Its enclosure walls, dummy chapels, and courtyards look like a stone copy of a royal city, built for rituals of renewal and rebirth. Its alignment to the cardinal directions, its layered steps climbing toward the heavens, its underground chambers mirroring the stars above. All of this suggests a deliberate, encoded structure, a training ground for the soul. If this is where pyramid building truly begins, then our usual story is upside down. What if the smooth pyramids at Giza are not the start, but the continuation of a much older spiritual technology? What if the lost builders of Saqqara were not just engineers, but initiates testing a dangerous new kind of school, one that used stone, darkness, and fear to prepare humans for the gates of the afterlife. We'll find out together, starting with the man whose name survived the sand, Imhotep. Who really built the first pyramid? Imhotep. A single human name echoing beneath millions of stone blocks. Did you know that for thousands of years, the builders of Egypt stayed anonymous? And then, suddenly, this one man appears. According to mainstream history, the answer to who built the first pyramid is actually very clear. Around 2670 BCE, in the early 3rd dynasty, King Djoser ordered something no pharaoh had attempted before at Saqqara. Instead of a low, flat mud brick mastaba, his court designed a towering 6-layered stone staircase to the sky, the Step Pyramid. At the center of this revolution stands Imhotep, Djoser's vizier, high priest of Heliopolis, and the first named architect in recorded history. On paper, the case seems closed. Djoser is the king. Imhotep is the genius official who plans the complex. Teams of workers carve limestone, align the corners to the cardinal directions, and create Egypt's earliest monumental stone pyramid. End of story, right? But what really happened inside this project that made Imhotep unforgettable? Why do we know his name, yet almost nothing about his methods? And why did later Egyptians take a royal bureaucrat and slowly raise him to the level of a god? Centuries after his death, Imhotep was no longer just an architect. Temples honored him as a divine healer, a master of medicine and magic, a sage who knew the secrets of life and the afterlife. Greek visitors compared him to Asclepios, their god of healing. Old legends tell a different story about this quiet vizier, that he touched a body of knowledge so dangerous and so sacred it could not simply vanish with his mortal life. What kind of knowledge turns a court official into a timeless symbol of wisdom? This is where we meet the lost builders. Not aliens, not outsiders, but an inner circle of initiates, architect priests, ritual engineers, and stoneworkers trained in mystery schools that never advertised their curriculum. Their classrooms were not written manuals. Their schools were courtyards, pylons, and underground chambers. The Step Pyramid complex, with its dummy chapels, ritual courts, and over 5 kilometers of tunnels, looks less like a simple tomb and more like a stone campus for a hidden training program. Imagine walking that complex with us. Sunlit courtyards where pharaohs ran the Hebsed festival to renew their power. Gateways that lead from blinding light into cold, narrow corridors. Deep below, chambers lined with blue faience tiles, imitating reed mat palaces of the living. Painted ceilings like star-filled skies. Is this just decoration for a dead king, or a map for a soul learning to pass the gates of the Duat? In this series, The Mystery Schools of Egypt, we follow the places where stone, star, and soul intersect. We'll compare what archaeologists say about Saqqara with what the mystery traditions whisper, and, most importantly, we'll ask a daring question. Was Imhotep inventing a new technology or restoring one remembered from a forgotten age? Stay with this journey, because with each layer of the Step Pyramid we descend, another layer of the story rises to the surface. From mud brick tombs to a stairway of stone. Before Djoser, the royal afterlife looked very different. Imagine the desert edge at Saqqara not as a forest of pyramids, but as a low, quiet city of rectangles. For thousands of years, elite tombs were mastabas, flat, mud brick benches of architecture hugging the ground instead of reaching for the sky. These mastabas were simple in outline: a solid, rectangular platform above, a vertical shaft cut down into the earth. At the bottom, a burial chamber sealed away with stone and clay. No towering silhouette, no visible stairway to the heavens. They were built like houses for the dead, closed and self-contained, meant to protect the body and hold offerings, not to act as cosmic engines or initiatory schools. On the surface, a mastaba might show a small chapel, a full store, and carved scenes of daily life. Beneath, narrow passages led to storage rooms packed with jars, tools, and food. The message was practical. The tomb was a locked pantry of eternity. It promised continuity, not transformation. No one was meant to wander its darkness in ritual. It was a sealed vault, not a labyrinth. Then, with Djoser, something breaks the pattern. At Saqqara, his monument begins as a familiar mastaba shape, but the design does not stop there. Imagine that flat rectangle, stretched higher, then another, slightly smaller, stacked on top, then another, and another, until the old bench tomb becomes a 6-tiered staircase of stone, rising more than 60 meters into the sky. This is the Step Pyramid, the first known attempt to build on such a scale entirely in cut limestone. Did you know this was a radical gamble? Mud brick gives way to dressed stone. Modest height explodes into vertical ambition. The whole funerary landscape changes in a single architectural leap. Mainstream archaeology describes it in clear terms. The Step Pyramid is Djoser's royal tomb, a statement of power and innovation, a prototype that will, over time, smooth its steps and evolve into the great pyramids of Giza and beyond. In this view, it is an experiment in engineering and royal propaganda, proving that a pharaoh's reach can be measured in tons of stone. But old legends tell a different story between the lines of that stone. In Egyptian thought, a stepped form is never just geometry. It can be read as a ladder, a stairway to the sky, a path for the kings Ba and Ach to climb toward the imperishable northern stars. Each level becomes a rung in a cosmic ascension, a visible diagram of the soul's journey. So what if this was not only a tomb, but a training device? According to the stories, pharaohs and priests did not wait for death to study the afterlife. The Step Pyramid complex, with its courtyards and ceremonial chapels, starts to look less like a graveyard and more like a campus, a school of royal immortality, where rituals of renewal, like the Hebsed festival, rehearse death and rebirth in stone. Most importantly, the real curriculum may not be above ground at all. Beneath Djoser's towering steps lies a hidden world of corridors and chambers, some lined with blue faience tiles that shimmer like a palace underwater. What kind of knowledge was encoded in that underground maze? Were those passages just storage for a dead king, or the first syllabus of a mystery school buried in the dark? Because if the surface is a stairway to the stars, the depths below might be the gates of the Duat itself. And the next layer of this story is waiting down there, in the cold, echoing tunnels beneath the first pyramid. A walled world inside Djoser's sacred enclosure, those cold, echoing tunnels, are only half the story. Above them, Djoser's architects built something just as strange. A walled world of stone, sealed off from ordinary life. From a distance, the Step Pyramid rises like a staircase to the sky. But did you know the entire monument sits inside a gigantic limestone box, almost like a fortress for the soul? This enclosure wall once stretched for hundreds of meters, more than 10 meters high, made of fine white limestone, carved to look like woven reed mats and palace facades. Along its length, there were dozens of carved doorways, framed and detailed as if they could open at any moment. Yet almost all of them were false doors. Only one narrow gate actually led inside. To the average Egyptian standing outside, this must have felt like looking at the horizon of another reality. A secret city with many apparent gates, but only one true path in. Who could pass that gate? Not the farmers bringing grain, not the craftsmen who cut the stones. Inside, access was tightly controlled. The living king, his closest priests, ritual specialists trained in the sacred calendar, perhaps a tiny circle of high-status initiates allowed to witness certain ceremonies. For thousands of years, most people would never see beyond that wall. They might hear distant drums, catch a glimpse of banners, feel the presence of rituals unfolding just out of reach. But the inner courts were off limits. Now, imagine that the guards step aside and let us enter. We leave the blazing desert light and step into the entrance colonnade, a long, narrow corridor lined with stone columns carved to imitate bundled reeds. The ceiling presses low. The passage is tight, almost cave-like. With every step, the temperature drops. Sound changes. Footsteps and voices start to echo in a strange, muffled way, as if the air itself has thickened. This is not just architecture. It is a controlled sensory tunnel, a passage from the open world of the living into a hidden school of transformation. Old legends tell a different story than a simple cemetery. They hint that places like this trained pharaohs and priests to cross symbolic gates long before facing the real portals of the Duat. Once inside the open courts, something even stranger appears. Many of the buildings are not buildings at all. They are dummy chapels and symbolic palaces, solid stone shells with no rooms, no doors, no practical function. They copy the forms of royal shrines and regional temples, but you cannot live in them. You can only move around them. Why build an entire city of stone illusions? Because this complex is a theatre of ritual, a stage where the king could run the Heb-Sed festival, reenacting his death, rebirth, and renewal of power. Priests could move in precise patterns through these ghost palaces, rehearsing myths of cosmic order. Now place yourself there as a newly admitted initiate. The sun is high outside, but in here, light is carefully rationed. Cool shadows cling to the colonnades. The smell of incense hangs in the air. Drums beat in a slow, measured rhythm that seems to sync with your heartbeat. You realize this is not just a graveyard. It is a designed environment for the most important journey of all, the training of the soul. But what really happened during those ceremonies? What kind of knowledge was being acted out on this stone stage? And most importantly, how did the king's body and mind become the main instruments of this mystery technology? We'll find out together as we step even closer to the heart of Djoser's pyramid. Imhotep, architect, priest, and possible initiate master. To step closer to the heart of Djoser's pyramid, we have to step closer to the mind that imagined it. That mind belongs to one of the most mysterious figures in all of Egyptian history, Imhotep. Did you know Imhotep is the first architect in history whose name we actually know? He was not just a builder. He was Djoser's vizier, the king's right-hand man, high priest of Ra at Heliopolis, overseer of works, and, according to most Egyptologists, the mastermind behind the Step Pyramid's radical design. Before him, royal tombs were low mud brick mastabas. Under Djoser and Imhotep, they suddenly became a 6-layered mountain of cut stone. This was a revolution. For thousands of years after, Egyptians would refine pyramid building, but the first great leap happens here, at Saqqara. Under this one name, Imhotep takes the idea of a flat tomb and stacks it terrace upon terrace, reaching toward the sky. He surrounds it with a vast walled enclosure, ceremonial courtyards, and dummy chapels where the king could rehearse rituals of renewal. Beneath, he carves an underground world of tunnels and chambers that mirrors the hidden landscape of the Duat. Most historical figures vanish within a few generations. Imhotep does the opposite. His memory grows. More than 1,000 years after Djoser, priests are still speaking his name. By the late and Ptolemaic periods, Imhotep is no longer just a wise official. He is worshipped as a god of wisdom, healing, and scribal knowledge. Old legends tell a different story from the simple title, architect. They remember a sage. According to the stories, Imhotep becomes linked with Thoth, the divine scribe, lord of writing and magic. Greek visitors hear of this Egyptian healer and identify him with Asclepius, their own god of medicine. Temples to Imhotep, Asclepius, rise as healing sanctuaries where the sick sleep in special chambers, hoping for dream visions that reveal cures. He becomes a patron of temples and libraries, of scrolls, diagnoses, and precise rituals. So what kind of knowledge did this man really hold? If later generations saw Imhotep as a master of sacred science, then his work at Saqqara may be more than clever engineering. The Step Pyramid complex could be a stone record of teachings, once given only to an inner circle, a curriculum of the Egyptian mystery schools, translated into walls, corridors, and gates. But what really happened when initiates walked those passageways in darkness? Were they only honoring a dead king, or were they enacting a training drama for the afterlife, moving through symbolic gates like a living soul in the Duat? Most importantly, did Imhotep invent this system from scratch, or was he the visible face of a much older, inherited tradition of sacred architecture, passed down through priests and initiates long before Djoser? Archaeologists can trace his titles. They can date Djoser's reign. They can map the tunnels under Saqqara. Yet a deeper question remains. Hidden in the stone, was Imhotep the first builder of pyramids, or the last guardian of a forgotten design? In the next part, we'll find out together where the clues really point, and who might have walked this path before him beneath the stone, Saqqara's underground labyrinth. To answer that, we have to go down, not up. Beneath Djoser's rising steps of stone, there is a second monument almost no one sees. A hidden world carved into the bedrock. Did you know there are more than 5 kilometers of tunnels and chambers under the Step Pyramid, spread across multiple levels, with blind corridors that lead nowhere and magazines that branch like veins through the earth? For a single royal burial, it feels excessive, unless something else was happening down there. Most of us imagine a simple tomb, a coffin, a few treasures, a sealed door. But under Saqqara, the reality is closer to a subterranean city. At its heart, a vertical shaft plunges nearly 30 meters straight down, like an artificial well into the Duat. Around it, passageways twist and double back, some ending in dead ends, others opening into long storage galleries that could hold thousands of ritual objects. It is not just a grave, it is a constructed underworld. Follow those corridors in your mind. The walls close in. Torches throw flickering light on stone. Then, suddenly, the rock changes. Certain chambers are lined with thousands of blue faience tiles, each one a tiny glazed brick, imitating the woven reed mat palaces where pharaohs once ruled in life. The ceiling above is painted with 5 pointed stars on a dark background, turning solid stone into a night sky. In one step, palace, sky, and underworld fuse into a single immersive environment. Where are we now? In a royal residence, a cosmic dome, or the realm of the dead? Archaeologists, working carefully and conservatively, give us a reasonable explanation. These are storage magazines for grave goods, they say, the supplies a king would need in the afterlife. The blue-tiled rooms are symbolic palaces, so Djoser can continue to rule beyond death. The star ceilings reflect the heavens, linking the buried king to the imperishable stars. Most importantly, this is also a laboratory of architecture. The first time Egypt's builders translated older mud brick and reed forms into permanent stone. That reading fits the evidence, but old legends tell a different story when we look through the lens of the mystery schools. What if this was not only a warehouse for offerings, but a labyrinth for training, a controlled underworld mapped out in stone, where each turn, each chamber, each shift in decoration marked a stage in the soul's journey through the Duat? Imagine pharaohs and priests descending with lamps and sacred texts, rehearsing the passage through danger and darkness. According to the stories of the afterlife, the soul had to pass gates, speak passwords, and recognize terrifying guardians. What kind of knowledge would you need to face that without fear? In a place like Saqqara's labyrinth, initiates could walk the path in life, memorize the sequence of chambers like a living scroll, and practice the rituals of death and rebirth under strict guidance. But what really happened in those tunnels? If this is a constructed underworld beneath the first pyramid, what story is it telling? And who was meant to walk it in the dark, guided only by torches and sacred texts? Modern eyes on ancient stone, scans, voids, and hidden chambers. To answer that, we have to look at the same labyrinth through modern eyes. In the last few decades, Saqqara has become one of the busiest archaeological zones in Egypt. While tourists gaze up at Djoser's Step Pyramid, teams of engineers and conservators have been working inside it, shoring up ceilings, rebuilding collapsed shafts, and carefully reopening passages sealed for thousands of years. At the same time, new surveys around the pyramid have revealed a spreading web of hidden shafts, rock-cut tombs, and corridors stretching out into the desert necropolis. Did you know that beneath this one monument lies more than 5 kilometers of tunnels and chambers? As restorers cleared debris and mapped the underground, they kept finding blocked doorways, blind turns, and stairways that lead to unfinished passages. Some chambers are too small or oddly shaped to function as practical rooms. Others are lined with vivid blue faience tiles, imitating the reed-mat palaces where pharaohs once ruled in life. It feels less like a simple burial shaft and more like a three-dimensional puzzle. While this work continued at Saqqara, another kind of vision was aimed at the Great Pyramid to the north. There, physicists used muon tomography, cosmic particles passing through stone, to scan the interior without drilling a single hole. The result shocked the world. Mysterious voids, hidden above known chambers, where no one expected empty space. Old legends tell a different story about what lies inside these monuments, but now the stone itself is beginning to speak. The same non-invasive methods, 3D laser scanning, ground-penetrating radar, micro-robotic probes, are slowly being turned towards Saqqara. Instead of smashing through walls, researchers can now trace cavities, map sealed corridors, and glimpse unknown rooms beneath the sand. From above, the Step Pyramid complex starts to look like a nervous system of passages and nodes, a designed complexity rather than random additions over time. Most importantly, the pattern inside Djoser's complex is not straightforward. Corridors twist, double back, and narrow. Some lead to symbolic stone doors that will never open. Others end in dummy chambers, carved with care but never meant for a body. This is architecture behaving like a ritual text. To move through it is to perform a sequence, descend, turn, confront a barrier, pass through a gate, emerge into a chamber of blue light. When modern scans reveal hidden spaces and convoluted routes, they confirm that the builders were creating more than a tomb. They were crafting a labyrinth that could be read, a choreography of the underworld encoded in limestone. What kind of knowledge was being rehearsed here? Fear mastery, rebirth, encounters with the gods of the Duat? We'll find out together as the data deepens. But here is the unsettling question. If every new survey at Saqqara uncovers more shafts, more tunnels, more secret chambers, how much of this stone curriculum is still sealed away? How many lessons from these ancient schools are locked behind unopened gates of rock, waiting for a generation of archaeologists, physicists, and symbolic readers to decode them side by side? And if the first pyramid is already this dense with hidden teaching, what might be waiting in the larger, later pyramids, still silent, still dark, just beyond the reach of our current instruments? Why so secret? The deeper question behind the stones. To answer that, we have to zoom out, because the real mystery is no longer just the stepped silhouette rising over Saqqara. It is the hidden world sunk beneath it, wrapped in darkness, silence, and deliberate confusion. Most of us grew up believing pyramids were simply giant tombs for pharaohs. But old legends tell a different story. Beneath Djoser's Step Pyramid, more than 5 kilometers of tunnels twist and turn, lined with blue faience tiles that shimmer like water when torchlight hits them. Fake doors, blind passages, sealed chambers no living crowd would ever enter again. Why build a palace for the dead that no living subject could admire? Did you know the architects carved entire corridors that lead only to solid stone, while the true burial chamber lies hidden behind layers of deception? This is not the logic of a monument designed to impress the masses. This is the logic of a lock, of a code, of a curriculum that protects itself. So, we have to ask a harder question. Why would a civilization invest such effort for thousands of years in underground passages that were never meant to host processions, markets, or festivals? What kind of knowledge demanded this level of architectural encryption? What happened in those blue-tiled corridors and star-painted chambers that was so charged it had to be buried under millions of tons of rock? According to the stories, pharaohs and priests did not see death as a cliff, but as a gate. The underworld, the duat, was imagined as a vast landscape threaded with rivers of fire, caverns of knives, and gates guarded by beings who demanded passwords and names. To move through that realm safely, consciousness needed training, precision, rehearsal. Suddenly, the labyrinth under the first pyramid looks less like storage and more like a map, a three-dimensional textbook. Each turn, each false door, each hidden chamber mirroring a choice, a trial, a gate in the invisible world. The secrecy is not an accident. It is part of the ritual. If the journey of the soul depended on exact knowledge, then that knowledge had to be shielded from corruption. So perhaps the core question is not, how did they stack the stones? But, what did they learn beneath them? What did initiates experience in those echoing passages, alone with oil lamps and carved stars, that convinced them this design could steer a soul through? Cosmic danger? And most importantly, why did they fear that such experiences, if misused, could be catastrophic? To answer that, engineering is not enough. We have to step into their cosmology, their rules of death, their map of the duat, because the first pyramid only makes sense if we see it as a response to a very specific vision of the afterlife. And to follow the lost builders into that vision, we now have to do what they trained so hard to do: cross the threshold into the dark and see what waits on the other side. Charting the duat, Egypt's map of the invisible world. So what did the Egyptians think waited in that dark beyond the threshold? A quiet sleep, a gentle fade into nothing. According to the stories, nothing could be further from the truth. For them, death was not an end at all. It was a dangerous passage, a high-stakes journey through an invisible realm called the duat, where every step could elevate a soul to the stars or erase it forever. Did you know they imagined this realm as vast as Egypt itself, but twisted into dream logic and nightmare geometry? Imagine a twilight landscape where the horizon never quite brightens, where the Nile becomes a black river branching into canals of light and shadow. There are caverns that breathe like living lungs, lakes that glow red like molten metal, and islands of reeds floating in a darkness that feels thick on the skin. This underworld was a complicated world filled with rivers of fire, endless caverns, and gates guarded by terrifying beings. Serpents the length of boats coil around bark canoes. Crocodiles with human arms grip the sides of the waterway. Hybrid guardians with lion bodies and scorpion tails crouch beside doorways of stone. Sometimes the sky arches above, Sometimes it runs beneath your feet, a band of stars you have to walk across without falling into the void. Most importantly, this journey was not automatic. No one simply drifted through the duat. The soul had to know where to go, whom to speak to, and what to say. Old legends tell a different story than a simple paradise. They describe the duat as divided into sections or hours, often 12, each ruled by its own powers. In every hour, new gates appear, new questions are asked, new risks unfold. The funerary texts read like a mix of travel guide and codebook. Doors speak, demanding, "Who are you?" Ferrymen refuse passage unless the traveller recites their secret names. A lake may burn the ignorant with fire, yet cool and refresh the one who knows the right ritual words. In one scene, the heart itself is placed on a golden scale and weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the principle of truth and cosmic order. A heart heavy with lies and cruelty tips the balance and is snapped up by a waiting devourer, ending the story right there. So how does all of this connect to stone and sand? If the afterlife is a labyrinth of gates and chambers, then building a physical labyrinth beneath a pyramid becomes more than architecture. It becomes rehearsal. It becomes a map. For thousands of years, priests and pharaohs walked through corridors that echoed the duat's sequence of hours, practicing the names, the forms, and the passwords they believed would matter when their own hearts reached the scale. But what really happened inside those hidden chambers under the first pyramid? What kind of knowledge was being drilled into the minds of kings in the dark? To answer that, we have to climb back to Saqqara's surface, stand before a strange, stepped mountain of stone, and meet the man whose design tried to turn the duat itself into architecture. Rules of the underworld, guardians, gates, and sacred names. The Egyptians imagined the duat as dangerous and terrifying. But did you know they also imagined it as organized, lawful, and precise? Beneath the rivers of fire and the serpent-filled caverns, there was order, cosmic order, Ma'at. In this underworld, nothing was random. Every region had a name. Every doorway had a title. Every guardian had a function and a specific formula that had to be spoken correctly. This was not chaos. This was a universe of rules. Imagine walking through a maze where each gate only opens if you recite the exact line on an invisible exam. The coffin texts, carved inside wooden coffins of nobles during the Middle Kingdom, preserve some of these rules. Over and over, the soul speaks to strange beings and begins with the same pattern. I know you. I know your name. A crocodile-headed guardian looms from the darkness. The text has the soul address it by its secret title, neutralizing its threat with a phrase that sounds almost like a password. Later, in the Book of the Dead, the pattern becomes even clearer. A spell might speak to a serpent demon, coiled beside a flaming lake. Oh, you whose face is turned back, whose name is He who lives on the dead. I know you. I know your name. Only then does the gate open. Only then does the flame withdraw. Old legends tell a different story of wild, chaotic hells. But what really happened in Egyptian thought was more like a ritual dialogue than a random nightmare. We see the same structure with the doors themselves. Some spells are addressed not to beings, but to the very door leaves and door bolts. A text will say, O door of the sky, whose name is Mistress of Breath, open for me. The door opens only when called by its true name. The pattern repeats: encounter, identify, declare, pass through. Again and again, the duat behaves like a sacred code lock. But the journey is not just about passwords. It is also about judgment. In the famous weighing of the heart, the deceased stands before Osiris, while the heart is balanced against the feather of Ma'at. Nearby, 42 assessors each demand a declaration: I have not stolen, I have not killed. The soul must match moral truth with ritual speech. Lakes test purity. Fields must be plowed correctly to prove worthiness and gain eternal harvest. Most importantly, moral alignment and ritual knowledge are fused together. Knowing the names without living Ma'at is not enough. Failing either side of the equation means annihilation or being trapped in lower regions of the duat. So what kind of knowledge would a pharaoh need before facing this high-stakes exam? For thousands of years, priests copied, recited, and refined these spells inside temple schools and hidden chambers. According to the stories, initiates rehearsed the ordeals of the duat while still alive, learning every guardian, every gate, every sacred name. If the afterlife is an exam with fixed questions and fixed answers, then the mystery schools start to look like intense preparation centers, not places of vague belief, but of drilling, of memorization, of precise ritual training. And we'll find out together how the first pyramid at Saqqara may have been designed as the ultimate classroom for that journey. Rehearsing death, training for the duat while still alive, and this is where the story takes a twist. The Egyptians did not wait for the moment of death to test their training. For pharaohs, high priests, and a tiny circle of initiates, the journey through the duat began while they were still breathing. The underworld was not only a place they expected to reach someday, it was a curriculum they rehearsed. Did you know that in this system the king was not just a royal corpse, but the primary initiate? His successful passage through the afterlife gates was believed to hold the whole kingdom in balance. If the pharaoh learned the paths, named the guardians, and spoke the secret formulas correctly, cosmic order, Ma'at, was preserved. If he failed, the sun's daily journey and the Nile's sacred flooding were at risk. Around him stood the high priests, the ritual technicians of this hidden school. They were the ones who memorized long sequences of spells, timed offerings to star risings, and guided the king through dramatized deaths and rebirths. Select initiates, maybe princes, high officials, or specially chosen students, were allowed to join these rehearsals. According to the stories, they did not just watch. They walked, chanted, and trembled through the mystery alongside their ruler. Most of us grew up thinking funerary texts were written once, rolled up, and buried with a mummy. But old legends tell a different story. Long before those spells were painted on tomb walls or copied onto papyri, many of them almost certainly lived as oral traditions. Priests drilled them like sacred scripts, reciting in call and response, correcting a missed word, repeating a divine name until it became second nature. Now imagine one of those training sessions. Night over Saqqara. Torches flicker against the white limestone walls of Djoser's enclosure. A small procession slips through a doorway and descends into the Step Pyramid's underground labyrinth. The air cools. The light narrows. Every step takes them deeper into the earth and deeper into the symbolic duat. In a low chamber lined with blue faience tiles that shimmer like an artificial night sky, a high priest raises a torch. He begins to chant lines we now label from the Book of the Dead, but to them it is simply the Book of Coming Forth by Day. The king, or a chosen initiate, repeats each phrase, the names of gates, the titles of guardians, the passwords that open the way. A wrong word could mean symbolic annihilation. A perfect recitation means safe passage. In this light, the Step Pyramid's maze is not only where Djoser would lie after death, it is where he practiced dying. Those 5 kilometers of tunnels become a map of the duat, a controlled environment where fear is confronted, where darkness is ritualized, where the soul's journey is rehearsed again and again until the route feels familiar. But if this was a school, not just a tomb, then who designed its lessons, and where did they get this knowledge in the first place? Walking the labyrinth, a gate-by-gate initiation. To answer that, we have to stop hovering above the Step Pyramid and go down, not just into the tunnels, but into a kind of living map. Imagine the duat's 12 regions and their terrible gates translated into stone, so that every turn of a corridor becomes a choice, every doorway a test. Did you know the Egyptian underworld was often described as a sequence of hours, 12 stretches of darkness, each ruled by different beings, each sealed by a gate that demanded the exact name, the exact formula? Now imagine walking that structure, not in the sky or beneath the earth, but inside Djoser's pyramid. You move from court to passage, from passage to chamber, as if stepping from one hour of the night into the next. The pattern is always the same. An initiate approaches a threshold, a low doorway, a narrowing corridor, a carved jamb with traces of paint. They stop, they recite a name of a gatekeeper, a line from the Book of Coming Forth by Day, a secret title of the pharaoh or a star. If the words are right, they pass through. On the other side, something has changed. A new vision, a new title, a new fragment of hidden knowledge added to the self. This is not just poetry. The architecture of Saqqara seems built for repetition. The long colonnaded entrance, the dummy chapels, the turns and dead ends under the Step Pyramid all invite a ritual choreography. Approach, pause, speak, cross, receive. Over time, the initiate is no longer the same person who entered the enclosure. Identity is being rewritten, gate by gate. Look at those blue faience chambers beneath the pyramid. Glazed tiles shimmered like water in torchlight, evoking the primeval flood that existed before creation. These were liminal spaces, artificial caverns of the first time, where a pharaoh or priest might rehearse sinking back into the cosmic ocean before rising again. Then, above or beyond, ceilings painted with 5-pointed stars turned the next chamber into a slice of the night sky, a region of ascent where the bar was trained to recognize its home among the constellations. And between them, blind corridors, sudden turns, passages that seem to lead nowhere. These are not design mistakes. They are tests. In total darkness, with only a distant voice or remembered map, an initiate learns to trust guidance they cannot see. According to the stories, a single wrong word in the duat could mean annihilation. So here, A single wrong turn might mean being left in the dark until the lesson is burned into memory. Most importantly, this training demanded absolute precision. Every step, every pause, every syllable mattered. This was a spiritual technology, drilled like a complex dance. For thousands of years, priests would have walked these same routes, repeating the same formulas until the pattern of encounter, response, reward became automatic. But what really happened inside those nights of practice? The stone labyrinth we can still explore is only the spine of a much larger curriculum. The true journey unfolded in the mind, in visualization, in carefully guarded oral teachings that never touched a wall. Old legends tell a different story than a simple tomb. That once initiates mastered this inner map, they could carry its gates and pathways far beyond Saqqara, into other temples, other deserts, and perhaps into other worlds. And if that is even partly true, then we have to ask, who designed a system like this? And how far back does this hidden school really go? Imhotep's blueprint, engineering a school of the soul. So who could have designed a school like this? Half palace, half underworld map, carved straight into the desert. The name that echoes out of the sand is Imhotep. But what really happened when this man stepped onto the stage of history? Did you know Imhotep was not only an architect and vizier, but also high priest of Heliopolis, the great city of the sun? In Heliopolis, priests guarded myths of Ra's daily voyage across the sky and his nightly descent through the Duat. They studied the gates, the guardians, the secret names that opened passage. Imhotep did not just know these stories. He seems to have built them. Look at the Step Pyramid complex with that in mind. On the surface, we see vast open courts, colonnaded corridors, and dummy chapels of stone. These were the stage for the Hebsed festival, where the aging pharaoh ritually ran, turned, and sat on thrones to renew his power. But under Imhotep's hand, this was more than royal theatre. The king was rehearsing his role as a cosmic being, proving he could sustain Ma'at not only on earth, but in the invisible realms beyond death. Above, the pyramid rises as a staircase of 6 giant steps pointing Djoser toward the northern stars, the imperishable ones that never set. Below, more than 5 kilometers of tunnels and chambers twist into a constructed duat. Blue faience tiles shimmered like marsh reeds under starlight. Stone portcullises imitated sealed gates. False doors waited for a spirit to pass through. This was not random decoration. It was a total environment for a soul's journey. Now compare these engineering choices to what a mystery school would need. The builders abandoned mud brick and chose stone, not just for prestige, but to freeze a ritual stage in time. Durable walls meant the same processions, the same chants, the same initiatory paths could be walked for thousands of years without collapsing. Complex circulation routes forced priests and, perhaps, select initiates to move in patterns, entering, doubling back, descending, emerging, just like the looping paths described in underworld texts. Every surface became a cue. Carved panels of Djoser performing rituals, star ceilings, palace facades, underground, all of them reminded the participant which myth they were inside, which spell or name belonged at each threshold. The architecture itself whispered instructions. This is where Imhotep starts to look less like a builder and more like the first great system designer of Egypt. He wove together architecture, ritual, sacred text, and astronomy into what we could call a sacred technology. No gears, no metal machines. Instead, a calibrated network of spaces, symbols, and timings designed to produce a reliable transformation of consciousness. You entered as a human king. You emerged, if the process worked, as something closer to an Ak, an effective, luminous spirit. But where did he get this technology? Was Imhotep its true inventor, a singular genius who turned royal burials into mystery schools? Or, according to the stories, did he crystallize in stone an older, perhaps pre-dynastic tradition of underworld training that had been passed down in spoken teachings and fragile shrines, now long vanished? Old legends tell a different story than simple progress, hinting at a legacy reaching back into a forgotten age. Most importantly, if the Step Pyramid is a stone textbook from that hidden school, what other devices might still be waiting for us in the sands? Unfinished, misunderstood, or deliberately concealed? We'll find out together as we follow this sacred technology forward to Giza and beyond, echoes across time. From Saqqara to other mystery traditions, to really understand what may have been happening beneath the Step Pyramid, we need to do something unexpected. For a moment, we step away from Egypt. We zoom out and ask, is this pattern of hidden schools, underground chambers, and rehearsed journeys through death unique, or part of a wider human mystery? Did you know that, more than 1,000 years after Imhotep, the Greeks created their own secret schools of the soul? At Eleusis, near Athens, initiates walked into dark halls, drank a sacred potion, and underwent rituals so secret that revealing them was punishable by death. They spoke of descending into the underworld, facing terror, and then emerging, transformed. No one wrote down the full script, but ancient authors hint at blinding lights, a great cry, and the feeling of having crossed the threshold of death and returned. Old legends tell a different story than simple temple worship. Orphic initiates carried tiny gold tablets buried with their bodies, inscribed with directions for the afterlife, which paths to avoid, which springs to drink from, what names to speak at the gates below. These were, in their own way, portable underworld maps, just as Egyptian priests had filled tombs and chambers with spells to guide a soul through the Duat's dangers. But the echoes do not stop there. Under the later Ptolemies, when Greek and Egyptian worlds fused, the priests made a striking connection. They linked Imhotep with Asclepius, the Greek god of healing. In sanctuaries of Asclepius, people did not just pray, they slept inside the temple, in special chambers, practicing incubation dreams. According to the stories, the god appeared at night, performed invisible surgery, or led the dreamer through symbolic journeys into darkness and back to health. What kind of knowledge was this? A medical ritual? A guided descent into the underworld of the psyche? In both cases, a sacred space, a trained priesthood, and a controlled encounter with fear, illness, and death formed a hidden curriculum. At Saqqara, the tunnels and blue-tiled rooms. At Epidaurus or Pergamon, the quiet dormitories where patients waited for a healing vision. Architecturally, the parallels are hard to ignore. Underground chambers and tunnels beneath temples, long narrowing corridors, sudden pockets of total darkness, rituals that used confinement, silence, and sometimes sound to push consciousness to its edge. Then, at the end, a return to the light, an emergence that felt like rebirth. But what really happened here? Were all these traditions copies of a single original school? Most importantly, were distant cultures secretly sharing blueprints, or simply answering the same terrifying question in their own way? This is where we must be careful. It is easy to jump to stories of one lost civilization teaching everyone, or even to alien architects handing down a master plan. The evidence does not demand that. Instead, it suggests something more human and, in a way, more mysterious. For thousands of years, people across the world have responded to death by building schools of the soul. Saqqara, then, may be one of the earliest and most monumental examples of this response. A stone university for the afterlife, rising above a hidden world of trials. And now, as we return to the sands around Djoser's Step Pyramid, we can look at those shafts and corridors with new eyes. If these were classrooms for the dead in training, what exactly were the lessons, and how far did their graduates carry that knowledge? All the way to Giza and beyond, reading the ruins, a new lens on Saqqara's stones. So let's walk back into Saqqara together, but this time as if we're entering a school instead of a cemetery. If Djoser's complex really was a stone university for the afterlife, how would we read its walls, its courts, its hidden chambers, and most importantly, what kind of journey would an initiate be expected to make through it? We step through the Great Colonnade. On a tourist map, it's just an entrance corridor. But imagine it as the first gate. Tall ribbed columns close on both sides, light narrowing ahead, the ceiling pressing down. This is the compression before crossing a threshold, a ritual squeezing of the senses. Did you know some researchers think these tight passages were meant to disorient, to strip away ordinary awareness before deeper rites? Emerging, we enter the vast open court. Archaeologists call it the Heb-Sed courtyard, used for royal renewal festivals. In an initiatory reading, this is Station 2, the test of kingship. Here, the pharaoh, and perhaps advanced initiates, reign symbolic races reenacting victory over chaos. A flat floor under a blazing sky, flanked by mysterious dummy chapels that cannot be entered. Old legends tell a different story about such facades, that they represent provinces of Egypt, the many faces of the kingdom the initiate must learn to rule within. Those dummy chapels, sealed and silent, become Station 3, the lesson of appearances. Doors that go nowhere, shrines with no inner room. They warn that not every gate in the duat opens, not every invitation is real. Walking past them is a ritual act of discernment, a choice to seek the hidden path rather than the obvious one. Then we descend, down ramps and shafts, into the underground labyrinth beneath the Step Pyramid, into a world of tunnels and chambers stretching for kilometers. Here, the curriculum turns from public ceremony to private ordeal. One chamber in particular stands out, the blue faience rooms, their walls covered in tiny glazed tiles, like shimmering reeds, some with star motifs overhead. Archaeologically, these are symbolic palaces, echoing the woven mat halls where living kings once sat. Esoterically, they are liminal classrooms, blue like water, glazed like fire, stars above like the night sky, earth below, but a celestial ceiling overhead. This is a perfect rehearsal space for the duat, between worlds, between elements, between life and afterlife. Imagine priests chanting under those starry tiles, guiding an initiate through spoken maps of the underworld. The whole complex is locked to the cardinal directions, its long axis aligned north-south, its corners watching the four quarters of the sky. Some suspect alignments to circumpolar stars, the imperishables that never set, home of the immortal Ak. In that sense, the enclosure becomes a cosmogram, a stone diagram of the universe. As the initiate moves from gate to court to underground chambers, they are not just walking architecture, they are walking a scaled-down cosmos. And Saqqara did not stop with Djoser. Later, step pyramids, smaller but echoing his design, rise nearby. Shaft tombs plunge down to painted chambers, covered in underworld texts. For thousands of years, priests kept copying and expanding these guides, as if the original model at Djoser's feet had proven itself too powerful to abandon. But what really happened here may not yet be fully written in the sand. What if there are still sealed rooms under the step pyramid, hidden inscriptions, or new scans waiting to redraw the entire plan of this mystery school? We'll find out together in the next layer of the story, where the stones of Saqqara begin to whisper about even older builders, and a technology of the soul that might not have started in Egypt at all. What the lost builders still teach us, and if the story of Saqqara is not finished, what does it already tell us? When we step back from the sand and the scanners, a clear path appears. We began with a forgotten pyramid that came before Giza, the strange stepped mountain of Djoser rising out of the desert. We followed the trail of his architect priest, Imhotep, whose name refused to disappear. Then we went down into the hidden labyrinth beneath Saqqara, through blue-tiled chambers and blind corridors that feel like the duat turned to stone. From there, we unfolded Egypt's map of the underworld and its training for the soul. Did you know that for thousands of years, scribes and priests agreed on at least a few solid points in this mystery? Djoser's complex at Saqqara is the earliest large-scale stone pyramid we know of. Imhotep, his vizier and high priest of Heliopolis, designed not only the rising steps, but the vast underground network below. Those passages stretch for kilometers, lined with symbolic decoration, imitation palaces, and star-painted ceilings. Later Egyptians looked back at Imhotep as a master of sacred knowledge, a healer, architect, and sage elevated to the rank of a god. So what can we actually say, and where do we cross a gate into speculation? We can measure the stones, map the tunnels, and read the carved names. We can see that the complex is aligned to the cardinal directions and wrapped in ritual spaces for royal renewal. But when we read the whole thing as a living mystery school, a place where pharaohs and priests rehearsed the afterlife while still alive, that is an interpretation. It is not a proven fact. Yet old legends tell a different story than a simple royal tomb, and Egyptian texts quietly support the idea. The Book of Coming Forth by Day, the underworld guides, the long lists of gates and passwords, all describe a curriculum of the soul. Imagine those dark chambers as classrooms where initiates practiced standing before terrifying guardians, speaking secret names, and passing through symbolic death. Does this vision fit perfectly? No, but it fits strikingly well. Most importantly, it reminds us that these lost builders were not only moving stone, they were building answers to questions that still haunt us. What happens after death? Can a human life be transformed? How do we carry meaning through the hardest thresholds? Their reply was not a lecture, but an environment, architecture, myth, and rituals woven into a single immersive journey. So what does that mean for us, far from Saqqara's dust? What if a modern life could also be treated as an initiation? Not in hidden desert schools, but in how we meet change, loss, and uncertainty. To prepare consciously for transitions, to learn the names of our fears instead of running from them, to approach mystery with both reverence and curiosity, as the ancients did. If Djoser's pyramid is a question carved in stone, then the next question is ours. How will we walk our own inner duat? Because the trail of the first pyramid does not end at its summit. It leads forward to even older hints of lost builders and to a technology of consciousness that might reach far beyond Egypt itself. Stepping into the next chamber, your role in the mystery. So we end where we began. Giza in the full blaze of the sun, Saqqara in the half light, one world on postcards, the other half buried in shadow. Did you know that behind almost every familiar monument in Egypt, there is an earlier, stranger experiment? Like this? Before smooth-sided pyramids crowned the horizon, Djoser's stepped mountain rose from the desert like a question. The real story often begins with the prototype, not the masterpiece. Here at Saqqara, that prototype is more than a new shape in stone. It is a whole way of thinking made visible. Imhotep and his circle took mud brick mastabas and stretched them upward, terrace by terrace, until a staircase to the sky appeared. But what really happened here? Did a single genius and his royal patron invent pyramid building from nothing? Or were they carefully reviving a sacred technology already old in their time? For thousands of years, old legends tell a different story than the simple tomb label. According to the stories, there were earlier ages, earlier kings, earlier schools. Knowledge passed down from a time when pharaohs walked with gods, when the duat was not just imagined, but mapped. If that is even partly true, then Imhotep may have been less an inventor and more a translator, turning memories of pre-dynastic rituals into limestone and blue faience. Think of the Step Pyramid complex now as a stone textbook. Above ground, courtyards, dummy chapels, ritual gates for royal renewal festivals. Below ground, kilometers of tunnels, star-painted ceilings, chambers glowing once with blue tiles that mimicked the reeds and river palaces of an earlier world. Was this just architecture for a royal burial, or a training ground for crossing the underworld, where stone became a mirror of the duat? We have only walked a few gates in this episode. Djoser, Imhotep, the duat, the labyrinth beneath our feet. This has been 1 hour in a longer initiatory series, one chamber in a much larger complex. Ahead lie other pyramids, other temples, other mystery schools, Giza's hidden voids, the strange resonance of the king's chamber, the temple roofs where priests watched the stars and timed their rituals to invisible cycles. So where does that leave us? Most importantly, with a choice to treat these monuments as dead rocks in the sand or as invitations. If you feel the pull of this mystery, stay with this journey. Question respectfully. Explore further sources. Treat each new episode as another descent and ascent, another passage in a shared curriculum that was once reserved only for pharaohs and priests. Imagine the final shot. The camera pulls back from the Step Pyramid at dusk. The stone turns gold, then grey, then almost black as the desert cools. Wind moves over the sand, but beneath that quiet surface, the underground labyrinth waits, its chambers dark, its blue tiles unseen. Somewhere in those tunnels, the lost builders are still teaching, still asking the same question. Will we learn how to read what they wrote in stone? We'll find out together in the next chamber.